Let's take a look at some of the other special effects that we can do. Looking at these two layers, you can see that All About Me and Michael Hicks are two separate layers. And because one is above the other on the page, I can rearrange the layer order without any trouble there, just by dragging and dropping it. So let's do some blending options. Right click, blending options for the All About Me up there at the top. I'm going to Control plus zoom in. Use the hand here. You can hold down the space bar if it doesn't appear. I'm going to show you a one-click wonder here called Bevel and Emboss. It's a little hard to tell with some of the fonts. I'm zoomed in here at 200%, so that's why you see a little bit of jaggedness around the outer parts. But you can also see this highlight and the rounded nature of the 3D effect. So by clicking on the word Bevel and Emboss, you can actually see some of the controls. And there are a lot of them here. There's inner bevel and an outer bevel. So some of them really don't look like what you want. Embossing all depends on what kind of look you're going for. The pillow emboss, as you can see, makes it look like it's indenting into the background. So that can be a lot of fun sometimes. I'm just going to go back to an inner bevel and play with some of the numbers. So there's a size here. Depending on what your resolution is, you may barely see any change, or it's really easy to go too far and completely lose the effect. So there's a number in here that you can just wiggle and get that 3D effect there. There's softening it as well, so you can just leave that one alone for most of the time. There's also an angle. This works a lot when you've got light. It's the angle of the light that's coming in, and we're changing that angle, so you could have the light looking like it's coming from below, or usually I go with an angle up and to the left. There's even some contours that this is just the basic, but you can play around and try and get some different shapes around the edges of that 3D effect. Some of them will make dramatic changes, some of them just don't look right at all. So it's a matter of experimenting and get the kind of look that you want. So that actually looks pretty good. There's also a color for that highlight. So you can actually have a color for it. And you can just scroll down until you find something that you like that's going to give it usually something lighter than the color of the text. Now the color of the text we've been changing with a color overlay. You can see that now having a blue with more blue, easily changing the color until you get just the right shades that you want. This is why we choose the color overlay instead of the text color originally, because it's really easy to go back and forth and get the look that you want. I'm going to press Control 0. Actually, let me get out of this. I'm going to say OK. To keep those effects, Control 0 will just show you the whole thing. It'll fit it into the screen no matter where you are. So you can see a nice 3D effect there. I'm going to double click on effects again and show you another one, the drop shadow. The drop shadow is right down here. And when I click on it, you can see that that angle is again up and to the left. If I Control plus, I can zoom in here a little bit as well. And you can actually just grab and move that shadow, and it's changing the angle and the distance as well. Now the distance is the big thing here. So you want it to be somewhat away from your original text. If it's right behind it, you can't see it at all. Play with that angle a little bit. Trying to match where the light is coming from. And the big one here is the opacity. If you just make it 100%, then it's not going to make it more legible. It's going to hurt the legibility because it's kind of doubling the words. So you want to make sure that it's not too thick. And if you're ever trying to print something, it usually prints out twice as dense as what you see there. So this right here would actually not print very well because it would come out more like that. It's just one of those things that when it goes to print. So you want it to be somewhat soft. You don't want it to be super obvious for the effect to really be good. And you don't want it like too far away. That also doesn't look good. So this is one of those, you got to play around with it, try the different angles, until you get the effect of the text floating in space right there. So that's about as dense and as far away as I would want that shadow if you're really looking for that effect. Let me show you one more, because this one can really make your text look really neat, and it's called the inner glow. So I'm double clicking on effects there instead of right click and blending options. Now the inner glow will let you add color. Instead of it going out, of course, it goes on the inside. Right now it's white. I'm going to change it to something dramatically different so you can really see it. And right now, you can't really see it very well. So let me increase the size of that inner glow, and you can see it kind of starting to come in. It's set to the screen mode, so it's actually screening out this color. If you just want it to be the color that you chose, you just switch it to normal. You bring the opacity up, and now when I increase the size, you can get a two-color effect without trying to mess with any gradients. You just get that color coming in from the outside. Let me Control 0 again. So there's a nice combination of colors that are complementing and then contrasting with the inner glow. You can easily take another look at it. Say, okay, now that I'm seeing it at this angle, let me see about increasing the size a little bit. Drop the opacity a little, just to be a nice subtle touch there. Very professional looking. And if we get all these effects, again, we can right click and copy. This is called the layer style. And let me paste it on this thinner text and show how it doesn't look all that great. We can't see enough of the blue here because it's a very thin font. Thin font and then doubled with the shadow. Very difficult to read that. So you might just turn off the drop shadow and leave that like that. The inner glow, maybe that value of how many pixels it went in is a little bit much for that particular font. Even the 3D Bevel and Emboss effect, you might want to decrease that a little bit so it's not taking so much of it away. So that's a couple of other effects. The Bevel and Emboss, making that 3D look. I call it like the puffy sticker effect. And the inner glow, adding that color from the outside going in instead of it going to the outside. And then the color overlay, of course, using that to give the text some color. That's how it looks like in black, and it's actually not bad, but you can change your color very, very easily with that as well. And drop shadow, not used a whole lot necessarily. It's easy to overuse that, but for your big titles like this, it could be pretty good. I would say this drop shadow is a little thick, so I'm going to reduce its opacity a little more. And you've got the spread. You can spread it out, and actually size makes it kind of go a little fuzzier. Yeah, that's about right there.